Hello there. This is the introductory lecture for Marketing One, also known as MKT113. And so in this video lecture, we just want to establish some, basic terms, some basic concepts that we'll be talking about throughout the course. But just first, we have to get to the basics. Of course, the first question one would have is, what is marketing? And it's interesting, I've had some students, one in particular, I remember, who was a marketing major and went on an interview, and the interviewer asked, what is marketing? And he kind of fumbled, couldn't quite come up with a definition. So I think it's important to have a definition for what marketing is. If I were to ask you what marketing is, many of you might say things along the lines of, sales, salespeople trying to sell a product or trying to promote a product through advertising or other types of promotional methods. And that's quite common, but it's a little bit more than that. And so here we have a definition. You don't have to write this down by any means. Marketing is a social and managerial process by which individuals and groups obtain what they need, want through creating and exchanging value with others. And this is by Philip Kotler, who's a bit of a marketing guru out of the University of Chicago. Great definition, but a little bit academic. I don't actually find it particularly practical. So I came up with my own definition. Marketing is the creation, communication, and delivery of value resulting in transactions. So you have to create something of value, you have to communicate it, you have to tell people about it, and you need to deliver it in some way. And hopefully there will be a transaction, usually a monetary one where you sell something. This also kind of relates to something we'll talk about in a little bit called the marketing mix. So you creation of a product, you communicate it or promote it, you deliver it, that's distribution, and resulting in a transaction where you have to have a price. Now, admittedly, the transaction might not always be monetary or financial. For instance, if you're selling a candidate or so maybe the transaction is getting a vote, but essentially that's what marketing is. It is more than just sales and advertising, and that's important. And of course, good marketing would be the creation of superior products, the communicating and delivering that superior value, resulting in repeated transactions and ultimately relationships with customers. I won't test you on this particular definition, but when you are asked for a definition, you should have one ready. You're welcome to use this one. In my definition, I referred to a transaction. What is a transaction? It's an exchange of something. A transaction occurs when each party values what they're receiving more than what they're giving. And I'll give you as an example. When I was a young man, I was invited to a wedding, and I realized I didn't have anything appropriate to wear. So I went to the store to look for a jacket. And I remember there was this one jacket I really liked. It was a nice fabric. I liked the color. I liked just about everything about it. Unfortunately, it was $300. And a $300 jacket. Yes, I could have afforded it. I did have $300, but I just felt that was really expensive for the jacket, as nice as it was. And what I realized is I valued my $300 more than I valued the jacket. Now, of course, I ask students, well, imagine that you are the salesperson who is potentially selling this jacket. What could you do to maybe facilitate this transaction? And of course, I ask students this question, and usually the first response is, well, you can lower the price. Okay, yes, you can lower the price. We could even engage in some sort of negotiation or haggling. But it might not be successful because maybe the store owner values the jacket more than they value, more than, let's say I offer $200. They may value the jacket more than they value the $200 because maybe they really think they can get $300 for it. And I assume that they did find customers who would pay $300 for it. The other alternative is, and often students will express it in different ways, to talk up the jacket, or explain some features of the jacket that were not immediately apparent. And what this is actually raising the value of the jacket or any item you're selling in the mind of the customer. That's where the value really lies, in the minds of the customer. So if they say, oh, well, it's made of a more durable fabric, it's reversible. Actually, that used to be a thing, to have reversible jackets. Not so much anymore, but or some other thing. Of course, and a third option, of course, is to give little add-ons. Oh, well, if you really like the jacket and you're willing to buy it, we'll throw in a tie or a shirt or something like that. That's of course, then you can't sell that tie or shirt, but so it is preferable to increase the value in the mind of the customer, because you're not giving up value, you're not giving up any money. So actually good salespeople know how to do that. Other salespeople I've seen, they're willing to cut price because they just want to sell it and then move on to the next customer or the next item to be sold. Anyway, so it's important that you each have to value what you're receiving more than what you're giving. And until that equilibrium occurs, you will not have a transaction, no sale. Some other definitions I want to talk about. One is, what is a market? And often when I ask people what a market is, they refer to something like a supermarket or a store. Actually, for the purposes of our marketing course, a market, and talking about in marketing in general, a market is a group of actual or potential buyers. You'll hear people say, well, do we have a market for this product? Or how can we get it to market? They really mean the people who will buy it, as opposed to a store, which we'll refer to as a marketplace. And we have a lot of other terms that will be derived from market, such as market segmentation, market share, and a few other things. Another one, maybe not as important to us, is the term industry. And industry is the opposite. It's a group of sellers, and you're all familiar with various industries: the entertainment industry, the movie industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the automotive industry. Basically, it's groups of companies or firms which are selling either the same things or related things. Like maybe you have one company that's selling cars, but another that's selling auto parts, but they're still in the automotive industry. So that's less important to us than market, because we are marketers, obviously. We also need to understand the needs, wants, and demands of these three terms. A need is a state of deprivation felt by a customer. If I were to drop you on a desert island, you would seek out things like water, shelter, food, that sort of thing. And because you would feel the need for that. But outside of that sort of extreme scenario, do we have needs? Absolutely. We still have to feed ourselves. We also have a need for entertainment. People say, so like one time my son, he said, I really need this particular I think it was a video game, that he wanted, and I really need it. And part of me said, no, you don't really need it. But actually, in a marketing sense, he did. He felt deprived because that's how he'd like to entertain himself. And we do need to entertain ourselves, because if we are deprived of stimulation, it becomes extremely unpleasant. We feel deprived. So, and it doesn't have to be a specific thing. It's just something to fulfill the general need. So I may need, for instance, I may need to eat, but I may want a particular food. And wants are how one prefers to fulfill needs, shaped by personal preferences as well as cultural preferences. So certain people of a certain culture tend to want certain types of foods. Somebody in Japan may prefer to have sushi, and maybe somebody in Italy would prefer or wants pasta or whatever they prefer. So we have personal preferences, but they're shaped by our culture. And finally, we have demand. And demand is when we have both the willingness and ability to make a purchase. If we're willing to make the purchase, and if we have the ability to make the purchase, then why wouldn't we make the purchase? Really, when we talk about demand, we're talking about sales. And this is the same demand as in supply and demand, and the supply and demand curves, if you've taken an economics course or an economics lesson. So we have to look to needs and wants to hopefully so we can generate demand, which will be our actual sales. And we'll get back to this concept later on. It's important to really understand what actual needs and wants are. What do consumers need and want? And just a few examples here. For instance, this is sort of something out of the past. Do people need photographic film or a way to capture and share images? Well, for over a century, it was the same thing. You needed photographic film, silver halide, based in gelatin that you could put in rolls or sheets to take photographs. And this one hits me personally because I actually lived in Rochester, New York, the home of Kodak, which was the #1 film company in the world. And they thought everyone loved film, and I understand it. This is this interesting phenomenon. I've witnessed it in other companies and other industries. If people work really hard on a particular product, and they're very successful, they obviously love that product because that product has given them things. And I heard about stories about meetings at Kodak where, and the irony here is they actually invented digital photography, but their mortgages had been paid by proceeds from film sales. They sent their kids to college from proceeds based on film sales. So they really were married to film. And when the culture shifted, the technology shifted towards digital, some people at Kodak were quite resistant to that. And by the time they finally decided to commit to digital photography, it was too late. And now, and I remember their headquarters building, a huge building in Rochester, New York. They ripped it down a few years ago because they had better uses of it. And Kodak is now a completely different type of company now. It still produces photographic film and chemicals and stuff, but that's a small part of their business. Now they've had to fulfill other types of needs and wants because they kind of blew it on the photography front. And something maybe you're more familiar with, newspapers. Do people want newspapers or do they want information? Well, obviously they wanted information. Newspapers used to be the way that most people would get their information. Now it's the internet. Whether you go to, CNN or New York Times or some other, Wall Street Journal, some other source. And actually, the most successful newspaper companies, the ones that survived, made that transition to being online news. So there's that. And a lot of people, of course, and I know a lot of people who were, for instance, I know a reporter who was a newspaper reporter, and he, lost his job and could not find, there just were too many out of work journalists. So luckily he was old enough that he could retire. Another one, my first two examples kind of had bad endings, but this is another case that I experienced personally that was a little bit different. I worked for a company that had two global headquarters, one in New Jersey and one in Lyon, France. And many executives would fly in between the two headquarters. And our procurement department went to the travel agency and said, we're buying a lot of transatlantic plane tickets from you. We need you to give us a discount. And they kind of, the travel agency kind of became stone-faced and ultimately said, guys, we can't do this. We're being squeezed by the airlines. you're squeezing us. It would be cheaper for us to go out of business. But they said, let's get back to you. Let's think about what we can do, and we'll get back to you. And they came back with a proposal that was unexpected. They said, well, what is the real need here? Is the need really for business transportation, going from one corporate headquarters to another, or is it to meet with colleagues? And obviously it's to meet with colleagues. So what they said is, we will set up a teleconferencing system for you. Now, this is long before Zoom or any of its competitors came around, where video conferencing technology was, in its infancy. And they said, here's what we'll do. We will set up the system for you in New Jersey and in France, and we will, give us a conference room, we'll set it up for you, and it'll be available to you anytime of the day or night, and we will maintain it for you. And when you actually have to fly between your two headquarters, we'll be there to provide you airline tickets, but we can't provide you a discount on that. But we'll reduce the number of airline tickets you need. So actually, that saved our company a lot of money, and the travel agency made more money because they weren't buying airline tickets anymore. They were maintaining the system. And it was a perfect example of understanding the core needs of a customer, as opposed to just thinking in terms of what they sold. Brilliant execution on their part. Some other terms that I think you need to be aware of, and that's the difference between features and benefits. Every product or service has certain features, whatever it is. The material it's made of, the functions that it can perform, that sort of thing. And so, they are aspects of, technical or physical aspects of the product. For instance, if it's a service, let's say it's an insurance policy, it would be the coverage. It would be what is covered. What's the payoff? What's the premium? Those sort of things. What's the deductible? Those would be features of an insurance policy. But is that why people buy insurance policies? No, it's because of the benefit it provides. Benefits are the advantages the customer or consumer derives from the features of the product. Different people may experience different benefits, whereas the features remain constant, they're unchanged, but different people will experience different benefits. Let me give you an example. I already said that a feature may have different benefits to different customers. This is an Aeron chair. It is a office chair. You may have seen one, you may own one, but they are kind of expensive. Last time I checked, they're between $600 and $800. But they are great chairs. It has certain has certain features. It has an ergonomic design. It has a web backing. Everything adjusts. It has nice rollers. You can't see it. I don't know if you can't see it here. I'm actually sitting in an Aeron chair. I did not pay $600 to $800 for it. I paid $40 for it at a corporate garage sale, but I actually like it quite well. Imagine for a moment that you are a salesperson working for Aeron, and you're not interested in selling one chair at a time. You're interested in selling, large numbers of chairs to companies or other organizations. You might sell 50 chairs to a company, or 100 chairs. So that's the kind of customer that you're focusing on. And let's say there's a particular organization that's interested in buying chairs, and you have to convince two people. The first person is the CEO, who will never sit in the chair except by accident, because they have their big red leather big boss chair. This is a chair for the workers. What benefits would there be to the CEO? Well, if you say things like comfort, well, the CEO doesn't care about comfort, because they're not going to sit in that chair. Assume that they're a cold-hearted person. What is the business benefit to them? Well, in this type of chair, people don't have to get up and stretch as much. So because it is a very comfortable chair. And so there's going to be more productivity. Maybe their production will be of a higher speed, which will mean perhaps higher profitability. I actually work for a company that didn't have Aeron chairs, but they moved to Georgia. And when I went down, I left the company at that point, but I did go down as a consultant, and they have Aeron chairs, and they have other things. And I asked them, how do they like this new environment? And they said they loved it because they could get their work done faster. And that means they could go home sooner. So, and that was a testament to the effect this chair has on profitability and production. I said there was two people that you have to convince. And I actually had this at another company where another company brought in a whole bunch of chairs for the employees to try out, see which one they liked. So let's imagine that a worker has been asked their opinion of the chair. Well, they're going to probably like it because of the comfort. I kind of mentioned one example where the workers would get home sooner because they get their work done faster. And perhaps if their work is based on the amount of production they do, that would increase income. And actually, that's why I wanted one so much, because I work in this office an awful lot, and I'd like to, get done quicker and get into other parts of my life. So that works well. Now, the point here is the features are unchanged, but the benefits are different based on different people, what their interests are. So when you're selling, you want to sell to sell the benefits of the product, not just the features. A number of years ago, I had to buy a new car. My old car had, I think, over 200,000 miles on it. I'd had it for like 16 or 17 years. And finally, my wife said, you need to get a new car. I said, okay, fine. So we went to a new car dealership. And I don't know if you've ever been to a new car dealership. It's like, oh, you come in and all of a sudden they're meerkats. They all, their heads go up and they figure out who can get to you quickest without actually running. And I remember this one guy got to us, and he said, "Oh, please come over, have a seat at my desk." So his territory. He's establishing his territory that we were his customers. Okay, that's fine. And he only asked me one question, only one. So, what sort of car are you looking for today? And I said, well, I'm not really sure. I'm thinking possibly an SUV, maybe a minivan, but I'm not really sure about that. He goes, well, the Toyota Sienna was voted first in class by Consumer Reports. It's got so many liters of this, so many liters of that. It's got a 328 Morgan Finder. I still have no idea what a 328 Morgan Finder is. He just regurgitated all these features. He didn't ask me why I was considering an SUV or why I would be ambivalent about a minivan. He just regurgitated features. I finally had to say, stop. I want to try one on. One of the reasons I was thinking of an SUV is because I had equipment that I had to move around for doing my work, and also I wanted to take my kids camping. These were benefits to me, things part of my lifestyle, my needs and wants and demands. But he didn't ask about that. Why would I think about a minivan? Well, actually, I was discovering that as I tried other cars, I was always hitting my knees on the bottom of the dashboard, and I didn't like that. So I was tend to looking for a vehicle that has slightly larger interior. I didn't really want a big car, but I wanted to be comfortable while in the car. He asked none of those things. So we did a test drive. We came back. We said goodbye. We did go back to that dealership, but my wife and I had the same reaction. Oh, there's that salesperson. Let's avoid him, because he was a terrible salesperson. He didn't really understand the concept of benefits. He didn't really understand. All he could do is regurgitate features. So, if you're going to be a salesperson, don't be like that guy. The best salespeople actually ask a lot of questions and don't actually have to talk that much. They don't have to present the features and that much. Another thing I want to talk about are various business orientations. depending upon what textbook you're reading at the time, they might say business concepts. It's the same thing. The first business orientation I want to mention is the production orientation, and this is probably the oldest. It's based on having your product broadly available and affordable. The perfect example of this would be Henry Ford's Model T automobile. Henry Ford, brilliant man, took the concept of the assembly line, and he was the first one to apply it to automotive manufacture. Previously, automobiles were, they were just sat there and people put the various parts on, and he was the first one to say, let's put it on an assembly line where the workers specialize on putting certain parts on. So they become expert at doors or putting on the tires or putting, whatever, windshield wipers or whatever parts on. And it's much more efficient that way than constantly switching tools and switching different things. So he was able to make his Model T automobile quite affordable. He priced it accordingly. He actually said that he wanted even his workers to be able to afford an automobile. At that time, most people were either walking, riding bicycles, or using horses. Only a few people had automobiles. And usually those were fairly wealthy individuals. He actually wanted a car for the masses. And he, in terms of availability, he built up a very extensive dealership network. So that worked for him. The only problem was, and this was something I think he actually said, he said, you can get it in any color as long as that color is black. This was not a product that had a lot of options. In fact, I think it had no options. You bought it as it was. There were no, variations of it. But it was very successful because there was very little competition at the time. Yes, there were other automotive companies, but none could crank out automobiles like Ford could. The production orientation worked. Not sure it would work very well today unless you had a product that was so unique that there would be very little competition. And I don't see any of those today. Of course, competition did come for the Model T automobile. And I think even Ford admitted he stayed with the Model T about probably 10 years too long. That's what I recall him saying anyway. Not to me personally, but him being quoted. So therefore, we might move on to something called the product orientation. And the idea of the product orientation is to make your product the best it can be. Product improvement is the focus, as opposed to availability and affordability. So improving your product. And there was an old saying, maybe your parents may have heard it, build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. And the idea is that if you really make it a superior product, people will seek it out. I think that is true under certain situations. I don't think it's always true. And there are companies which have taken product improvement as their sort of main focus. But it's not, I think, not often enough. There was a movie a while back, I think with Kevin Costner, called Field of Dreams. It was slightly supernatural movie. And he was a farmer in, I think, Iowa, and he grew corn, and he was the son of a baseball player, a professional baseball player. And he would hear from the cornfield, build it and they will come. And this became a very famous and a very overused expression. I think it is actually the worst business advice out there. Build it and they will come. Some might come. I think you have to have something more than just building something. The next orientation is the selling orientation, which says basically you've got whatever you got. You can have a good product, you can have a bad product, no matter what, you need to promote it. Don't expect to build it and they will come. You've got to go let them know that it's there. You've got to promote it. And obviously people who are in sales and advertising very much adhere to this. In fact, you might even find some of these orientations, more than one of these orientations within the company. For instance, a manufacturing and research and development division might be very much product oriented, and a marketing division be very sales, promotionally oriented. And this is something, that comes with trying to manage a large organization that markets. The one thing is that all three of these begin with the same thing, and that's the product. Let's say this is the product. Essentially they're saying, here's my product, want to buy it, and they focus on different things, availability, affordability, product improvement, promotion, but essentially, here's my product, I'll make it as best as I can, but here it is. I'm probably not the best approach. I mean, these approaches have been successful, but I think we need to evolve. And so I'm going to focus instead on the marketing orientation, which does not start with the product. It starts by focusing on the needs. Remember, we talked about needs, that feeling of deprivation that people feel when they don't have something. Needs drive the market. Find out what people need and then make it for them. And this means we have to do a lot of listening, a lot of asking of questions, understanding the market, and figure out what do people need, and then we'll create it. Now, it's not always a straight line. It's not you just go out and ask questions and people tell you. No, the people don't always know what they need. A lot of products that became very popular that nobody said, "Oh, this is what we need," ahead of time. Sometimes you surprise people, but I think Apple was a good example of that. They didn't focus on what people were asking for. They tried to figure out what they needed, and they focused more on product improvement or product invention. But ultimately, if people didn't need it, it wouldn't sell. In fact, that did happen with Apple. Apple Computer created a computer before the Macintosh called the Lisa, and it was for its time, a technologically superior computer, and it didn't sell very well. It was priced poorly. There was no overwhelming application that could be run on it that would drive people to buy it. Steve Jobs actually had to learn to focus more, use more of a marketing orientation as opposed to a product orientation. We will, for our part, try to focus on the market using the marketing orientation, trying to figure out what people need, and try to adjust our products and our promotions and everything else to meet those needs. The marketing process, I'm going to give a sort of a brief overview of it. First, because we are devotees of the marketing orientation, we need to understand the market, the marketplace, the customer needs and wants, all of that. We need to, know who we're selling to. And then we need to have designed a customer-driven marketing strategy. How can we get our products? How can we create our products and get them to and have them appeal to customers? The customers are the most important part of your product. Hopefully, if you sell it, they will love it, and so you have to put yourself in the mind of the consumer or the customer. And then you need to construct a marketing program that delivers superior value. You may have a great product, but how can you get that product to them? Great example of this is, for instance, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. They have a great program there. I mean, they have they can have the same cars as any other rental car company, but whether they pick you up. They pick you up, bring you to their office, you fill out the paperwork, and just drive away with a car, as opposed to Hertz, which says you have to get to us, then we'll rent you a car. So they have come up with a way to deliver superior value. And you also want to build profitable relationships and create consumer delight. Consumer delight sounds like one of these really fancy phrases, but people do need to be delighted with your product. They don't necessarily have to use those words, but they have to be happy with your product. And Why build these profitable relationships? The key word here is relationship, because it's very difficult to survive on one-time sales. You really need repeat business, which means you have to develop a relationship. And you'll find that the strongest businesses have strong relationships with their customers and others. And then you have to capture value from those customers, meaning you have to get paid. You have to figure out how to monetize that, and that's usually fairly easy. You set a price and they'll pay you that. But you want to create profits, obviously. That's why people go into business. You also want customer quality. And what do I mean by customer quality? You want customers who buy a lot or buy often, who are happy, who you will be happy to see. And again, this goes to the relationship. Salespeople and sales organizations actually rate customers. Usually with a letter, you're a customer. A customers are people who buy a lot and they buy often, and they just love you. They love your product. Those are great customers. And that's where you focus most of your effort. B customers buy somewhat often. They buy a decent amount. C customers less so. Your D and E customers buy very little and very rarely. Where are you going to focus your efforts now? Obviously on the A and B customers. And we can talk more about that when we talk about sales later in the course. But since relationships are important, you want to do some relationship management, and you want to listen. If you don't expect to see this customer ever again, you can focus on the transaction, getting the most for whatever it is you're selling. But if you want repeat customers, you have to build that relationship, as I just said. That means maybe not pushing for the highest price, maybe being really nice to the customer. I mean, some of you've probably experienced poor customer service, and usually those people don't really care if you come back. Let's say it's a restaurant on a busy highway, maybe a fast food place. They know people are just passing through. They're probably not going to come back. It's unlikely. So maybe they don't work on their relationships as much, but other companies do need to. So you want to build those customer relationships. And part of it's because you recognize something called the lifetime value, or the LTV. A person who today may buy something very little from you, but you realize that they are not what they're buying today. Let's say they're only paying $2 something. That's not a lot of money for much of anything. And you could maybe blow them off. But if you know that they are going to come back over and over again, you want to recognize their lifetime value and be nice to them on every day that they come in your store, or they come to buy something from you. There's this great story about Stu Leonard's. Stu Leonard's is a sort of dairy store in New England. And this story was related by Stu Leonard Jr., who was the son of the founder. And apparently there was an assistant manager who was working in the store, and a customer, Mrs. Cooper, comes in, and she goes to the assistant manager and said, I'm baking. Do you have any cinnamon? There's no cinnamon on your shelf where you normally have the cinnamon. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I guess we're out. Now, many people would just leave it at that. Sorry, we're out. Because, well, we'll be getting some more cinnamon in on a Tuesday. But she says, well, my grandkids are coming. I really, I want to make my cinnamon cookie recipe for them. Now, two things can happen. One is the person just says, sorry, I can't help you. I mean, it's a $2 jar of cinnamon. The markup on it is maybe the net margin on it is, let's say, maybe 3%. So that's like 6 cents, maybe 8 cents. They're not going to make a lot on that. Even if it's 10, even if it's a quarter. But in this case, what the manager did was said, if you can come back this afternoon, I'll make sure we have cinnamon. I will go to the local distributor and get I'll get a case of cinnamon, not just the one jar, if you're willing to come back. And she says, oh, sure. Yeah, I'll come. If you're going to go and get the cinnamon, I will come back. And so now in that transaction, it's actually a losing transaction because yes, Mrs. Cooper will come back and buy the $2 or $3 jar of cinnamon, and they've made a little sale. But let's say that distributor is half an hour away, one way, and then back. That's an hour of the assistant manager's time. That's lost, and that person could be doing something else. So it's really, it actually, let's say you make a quarter on it, but you've wasted, let's say at the very least, $15 on that person's time. The reason, of course, is that if you delight Mrs. Cooper by getting the cinnamon for her, she will come back. Her loyalty will only increase. Now, it would not be unreasonable, and nobody would probably blame assistant manager or manager for saying, I'm sorry, we just don't have any, we'll get some soon. And what will Mrs. Cooper do? Mrs. Cooper will go to another store. And that gives that other store an opportunity to thrill and delight Mrs. Cooper. I actually saw somebody lose. I worked for a company a production company. We'd order lunch, and the owner of the company had a favorite place we'd order lunch. We'd place our lunch order, and they would deliver it, or we'd send somebody to pick it up. One time we had to work on a Sunday. We had a really rush job, and schedule wise, we worked on a Sunday. And guess what? That restaurant was closed on Sunday. So we got a menu from another restaurant and got from them lunch. And the owner of the production company really liked the lunch that he got. So he said, from now on, we're going to order from them. And I felt bad because, I never actually went into that restaurant that we ordered the lunch from originally. But one morning I did, because I didn't have any breakfast. I went out just to get a blueberry muffin or something like that. And I remember the woman's name was Seema. Seema. So I go to pay for it, and says, "Oh, you're from Cowan's. Why don't you get lunch from us anymore? Did we do something?" So, no, you didn't do anything wrong. I really feel bad, but one time it was a Sunday, we got from someplace else, and the boss really likes the other place. So, and I don't really blame them, but they lost a customer because they weren't open on Sunday, which is not necessarily fair, but that's the way it is. So back to the Stu Leonards and Mrs. Cooper example. Mrs. Cooper, they could lose Mrs. Cooper as a customer for not having the cinnamon. It's not always a matter of being fair. Okay, we lose Mrs. Cooper. That's a customer we've lost, and we want to replace Mrs. Cooper with another customer. It actually costs 5 to 10 times more to get a new customer in terms of maybe sales or advertising or promotions. Way to reach out to other people to get new customers. It's easier to keep your current customers than it is to get new customers. So keep your current customers happy. Obviously, you can't ask me any questions on this video, but in the classroom, you certainly, if you have any questions coming from this lecture, please ask them. Or if you really want to email me, you can do that. So, all right, take care.